How surprised are you to see all of the talk and the controversy and the focus on FEMA the past few months?
Ruben, there's always been a lot of conversation about FEMA and the things that can be done to potentially improve the way FEMA delivers its programs. And I'll be the first one to say that there are many opportunities to improve the efficiency in how they deliver programs to help states and communities. But it's important to remember that states and local jurisdictions have always had the primary responsibility for managing disasters. FEMA only comes in when something is so significant that it exceeds their capability and they ask for assistance. And so I think that there's often this real misunderstanding of the role that FEMA plays. And I think we saw a little bit of that during Hurricane Helene, and it kind of played out going into the beginning of this year. But you've also seen a little bit of a shift in posture. And I think, people are realizing that while FEMA definitely needs to have some improvements, the role that they play is so critical in supporting these jurisdictions to help them before, during, and after disasters. And I'm hopeful that this review council is going to be able to come up with some really good recommendations for ways to actually do that.
Yeah, I want to talk about the review council too. But I've heard from Republicans, I've heard from Democrats. They both agree that changes do need to be made to FEMA, as you hint at there. Are there things you think that FEMA could have done differently in terms of Helene in Western North Carolina?
I am really proud of the response that happened in Western North Carolina. And I think some of the criticism came during the response, but again, I think it was part of a misunderstanding of what FEMA's role is, right? When you heard the president and others say that we don't see FEMA on the ground, well, FEMA's role isn't to replace the first responders, the firefighters, the police officers. We do send in urban search and rescue teams or other search and rescue teams to go assist. But the role is really to embed with the state and the local jurisdictions and hear from them firsthand what their needs are and then move those resources in. We had moved a lot of commodities in, and so those commodities were in place and able to be moved forward as needed. And so I'm really proud of that. It's the recovery that's so complicated, right? Recovery takes time. Every jurisdiction is going to have a different need. And the recovery that we see is going to be needed in Western North Carolina is really complex with all of the different damages that are happening there. That's really where the improvements in the program delivery need to happen, is in that recovery realm. And how can we help states recover faster and get that process started faster?
Well, and I think that's important is the sense of what exactly the role of FEMA is, because it's often misunderstood, as you say. The argument and the thought from the Trump administration is that they basically, from my understanding, would like state and local governments to really take the lead in responses to natural disasters and have FEMA really take a backseat role and be more of a financial supporting role and not really be involved in the long term so much. How different is that from the FEMA that you ran and that had been run in previous administrations?
That's exactly the way the operation works. States always have the lead role in response. And again, as I stated, FEMA only comes in when they need additional assistance, and we only provide assistance at the state's direction. And when it comes to recovery, FEMA is a reimbursement agency. They reimburse the states for the costs that they incurred to rebuild after a disaster. I think where the conversation is states want that part to happen more seamlessly, and they want to remove some of the bureaucracy. And there is a lot of bureaucracy that can be taken out, things that I was frustrated during my time, but there's also a lot of regulation that you can't get rid of. And so I think one of the conversations we've heard a lot is about putting block grants out there and, just as you said, give a percentage to the states. But until you know what the total impact is going to be, my concern is, are we going to be able to estimate accurately enough to be able to give them a percentage of the cost of what they think the damages are going to be? But also, it doesn't alleviate the need for compliance with federal regulations like environmental laws and procurement laws. And so I worry that states won't follow those. And in the end, what might happen is that after an audit happens, they may have to give some of that money back because they didn't follow proper regulation. And so there's a balance between getting rid of some of the bureaucracy, but also maintaining accountability.
So, when you talk about sort of what the Trump administration would like to see from FEMA, there's a lot of conversation that um, there are concerns that if FEMA is really scaled back, that states won't be able to handle the natural disaster recovery. There's states like Florida, Texas that are big states that can handle a lot of it on their own, but some of these other states cannot, can they? I mean, how much do they need FEMA in this recovery?
States like Texas and Florida are really mature states. Their emergency management programs are some of the best that are out there. But as you said, that's not the same everywhere. And again, I think as we think about having these types of block grant programs, it really creates a conversation about using a one-size-fits-all approach. Yet the needs in Arkansas and Kentucky and Missouri are going to be very different than the needs in Florida or Texas. And when they need assistance, they ask for assistance. And so if you don't have that force multiplier by bringing in the federal responders, and it's not just FEMA, it's the entire federal family. I think it's important to remember FEMA is just part of the team, and we bring in the Department of Defense, the Army Corps of
Sure.
Engineers, health and hospitals, right? All of them come together to support the state. And so if you don't have that support, those states that don't have the capacity within their own states or jurisdictions are going to have a harder time getting that recovery process going.
So if you're a state like North Carolina, if you're a state like Kentucky, should you be making preparations right now that FEMA may not be there readily as available this hurricane season as they have in the past?
I think that states should always be trying to do everything they can to be as ready as possible to support their communities, and knowing what their capabilities are and where their gaps are. And understanding where those gaps are, I think what states need to be able to do right now is be able to communicate clearly when they need help and why they need help, so they can articulate that in a way that continues to get the support that they need while this review council and others are going through and trying to understand what the full extent of FEMA's role is going to look like in the future. It has to be this conversation, this partnership with states and locals to understand and develop what the future FEMA role is going to be, but giving states enough time to be able to prepare for what that future environment looks like.
Well, given the uncertainty when you have the FEMA Review Council looking at potential changes to the agency, and then when you look at the leadership at top, the acting administrator, Cameron Hamilton, was removed from the position. His replacement, David Richardson, there was some reporting that he didn't know there was such thing as a hurricane season. Now, DHS has said that that was a joke, but in terms of the uncertainty and sort of the change and transition for this agency that is much smaller staff-wise than it was when you were there, are you confident this agency is in good hands?
I'm confident that the women and the men of FEMA that have been there are going to be able to do everything that they can to help people before, during, and after disasters. They are some of the most dedicated public servants within the federal government. But they also do need leadership that's going to be able to help guide them and give them clear intent. And one of the things that we saw after Hurricane Katrina was the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act, also known as PCEMRA. And in that, it stated that the administrator of FEMA needed to have 5 years of executive emergency management experience. That experience is really critical because of the changing times we're seeing ourselves in, the increase in the intensity of the disasters or the severe weather events that we're seeing. You need to have somebody that can understand and anticipate, work with the states, but also work with their teams, work with the staff at FEMA to make sure that they're doing what they can before to help states posture and also begin that recovery process and supporting them and jumpstarting them on that way.
I'm just curious what you're hearing from former employees that you worked with that are still at FEMA. What are they saying about morale at the agency?
I think that there was definitely some impacts to morale early on, and I think it lingers now, right, with all of the uncertainty and all of the conversations about, we want to get rid of FEMA, we're going to downsize FEMA, FEMA hasn't been doing their job. I mean, that's demoralizing. And as I said, these are amazing public servants. They are so dedicated, many of them that spend days and weeks away from their own families to go into the communities that have been impacted to help them. mean, you don't get much more of a sense of mission than that. And when I talk to people, even during my time or now, the reason they stay at FEMA is for the mission. But when that mission is unclear, then they live in this uncertainty, and it impacts their morale. But I know that they're going to do whatever it takes when that hurricane hits to be able to help anybody that's been in the path of that storm.
And obviously, we're in the week of hurricane season just starting. There was a report that I'm sure you saw from CNN that said there was an internal review that showed FEMA, this was as of last month, FEMA is not ready for the upcoming hurricane season. What's your level of concern that FEMA is not ready for this hurricane season?
One of the biggest concerns that I have is whether or not we have a clear, or FEMA has a clear understanding of the impact of the staff reductions in other federal agencies. You know, we've talked about the impact of the staff reductions within FEMA. And again, they are going to be strained. It is going to be harder because they're going to be doing, you know, the same mission with less people. They've lost some institutional knowledge. But again, as I said earlier, FEMA is just one part of the team, and we rely on a lot of their federal partners to come in and help. But many of those federal partners have also lost staff. And so I'm not sure, I don't know if they have done an assessment, but that would be one of the things that I would want to do is understand what the impact is of the loss at other federal agencies and how are they going to be able to come in and support FEMA during one of these responses.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Army Corps of Engineers, Housing and Urban Development, National Weather Service. I mean, there are multiple agencies that are involved in natural disaster. FEMA certainly gets the most attention, perhaps. I want to touch on just one last topic, Deanne, and that's about emergency declarations, because there's been reporting that FEMA had been delayed in signing off on these emergency declarations for states that had suffered natural disasters, specifically tornadoes in a number of states. I just want to get your thoughts on whether that is customary. I mean, how long does that process usually take, and what is the ripple effect of something like that being delayed?
The process time can vary depending on the severity of one of those severe weather events, right? If it's something that has some impact, but it's not completely obvious how bad it is, you know, that process can take several days or weeks as they go out, work with the state and the local communities to gather data and understand the full impact. But when you have something that you can see the amount of destruction, one of the things I would do would be, first thing is call that governor, talk to the governor, and understand the impact, and then determine and most likely travel out there the next day or two to see firsthand, right? It's hard to make decisions from, you know, my office in Washington, D.C., because I'm not feeling what that lived experience currently is for these communities. And so being able to go out in the community, talk to the survivors, talk to the governor, local elected officials, helps me understand the overall impact, and then look at the data and be able to make a recommendation to the president. And that allowed me to make that recommendation quickly. What we wanted to be able to do is make recommendations as fast as possible to get rid of some of that bureaucracy so states could start their recovery process. When that's delayed, recovery is delayed. It means people can't get their lives moving in a forward direction. And if they're delayed and then they have another storm, it just makes them more vulnerable to that future impact. So the faster you can get that help, the sooner that recovery starts, the less vulnerable those communities become.
And the other piece of that is in terms of North Carolina specifically, where Helene hit and devastated the state, there's been a lot of attention on the fact that FEMA did not accept the request from the state to extend a 100% federal match when it comes to debris removal, eligible debris removal for Helene. Instead, that will be 90%. The difference of the 10% the state says is hundreds of millions of dollars. Can you just provide some context? Is that normal that a 100% match would not be extended up to this point, given Helene was last year?
Well, one of the things with the 100% is with North Carolina specifically, that they were given 100% for 180 days right from the very beginning. That was one of the things that President Biden did because of the severity of the impact of those communities. And the goal of that 100% is really to help facilitate getting that debris moved out of the way. And I think partially that's what North Carolina was asking for, if I recollect, right? They were asking for an extension on that debris removal
Right.
because it was so significant. There aren't many cases where 100% has gone beyond 180 days, but there are some when something is that significant. And so every case has to be taken individually and looking at what the impacts are and is it going to help facilitate the recovery? And so you have to take the whole situation into consideration. I don't have obviously all the details of where North Carolina's at now, so I can't say if it was the right decision or not.
Sure.
But you have to look at the whole impact and work with that community to understand what they're going to need to help facilitate that recovery.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like 100% extension is a customary thing. But as Republican and Democratic lawmakers pointed out in their letter requesting it, they cited examples of how extensions like this have been granted in previous storms like Hurricanes Maria and Ike. So we'll see what happens with it. But right now, that is down to 90%. Deanne Criswell, really appreciate your time. Before I let you go, I'm just curious, the FEMA Review Council is underway. Have you had any conversations with the council? Is there a recommendation you've got for them as they undergo here?
No, I mean, I'm not involved with the FEMA Review Council at all. I'm going to watch from the sidelines, and I'm going to hope that they take a fair look at the agency and a fair look at what states and local jurisdictions need and work together to come up with meaningful recommendations for change.
Well, there's so much that we had to discuss. So I really appreciate your time, Deanne, and hopefully we have a slow hurricane season. But unfortunately, the projections are it could be a higher than normal one. So, Deanne, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.